What's up everybody, I'm Derek, this is Rocking E Forge, and today we're going to be forging a round punch. Now this punch is going to be forged in the style of Mark Aspery from his book, Skills of a Blacksmith Volume 1, and is one of the tools required to be forged for the California Blacksmithing Association and Artist Blacksmithing Association of North America's Level 1 certification list. Round punches are one of those vital tools in your toolbox for punching round holes into pieces of steel when you either don't have access to a drill or simply like to do things in the more traditional way. Now without any further ado, let's get to the shop and let's get rocking.
All right, so I'm starting off with a 3/4 inch round bar of 4140, cut to 6.5 inches. It's a pretty easy to work steel. Heat treat's really nice. It's got 0.4% carbon, which makes it a really nice to work with, but also highly effective steel for punches and chisels. If you want a longer punch or a shorter punch, just change that length according to how you want. So I'm gonna throw this in the fire and we're gonna get started. All right, so the first step in forging these punches, any punches, is putting the hammer end into the punch. I'm just drawing a short square taper here in the end, making sure everything's squared up. You don't want to get this too thin because you're striking it with your hammer. So now that I've got a square taper put in the end of that, I'm just gonna octagon that up. Really just knock off the corners. Gives it a nice little artistic style. I'm gonna switch hammers to my rounding hammer, bring it to the horn of the anvil, and put in what I call the indexing swell. We'll show you that on the next heat. All right, I'm gonna come to the horn of the anvil using the round side of my rounding hammer. This is what I call the indexing swell. It gives your thumb and forefinger a nice place to kind of align the punch while you're using it. Easy step to get things out of alignment. And keeping things straight throughout the process just kind of makes it easier. But now that we've got that swell forged in, I'm gonna flip this around, I'm gonna put it in the fire and start working on the tip. Now very similar to the struck end, I'm just gonna put a square taper into the tip of this. All right, so we're gonna get down to pretty close to our intended width before we start drawing that taper back, and then we're gonna correct how out of square it is, because I don't know if you can tell, this is ever so slightly twisted. So that'll involve laying it on the anvil and hitting at an odd angle to bring that back down into square. And for a point of clarification, you're looking for a 1/4 inch punch, you don't wanna forge this to a 1/4 inch square, because you're gonna wanna forge into an octagon and then round, and you're gonna lose a lot of that thickness, and you can grind that back up the punch if you lose that, but to save yourself some trouble, make sure you're forging thick and then grinding thin. It's the same as making a knife. So once we've got this tip in, we'll start drawing that taper back toward the struck end of the punch. All right, so I've got this forged down into a square taper from the main body of the punch down to the tip. The tip is currently at a 1/4 inch square, and I was just measuring that with my measuring stick. So I'm gonna take this to an octagonal taper and then turn the first 2 inches from the tip into a round, and that'll set us up nicely for the grinding process. So let's get it back in the fire and we'll keep going. So this is rounded up now. We've got a nice transition from round to octagon up to the swell. I'm gonna spin this around. I'm gonna go back to that transition point between the swell and the rest of the body. And I'm just gonna blend that into the taper to make it look a little nicer. And then I'm gonna put my touch mark in it. And we're gonna do an annealing cycle, put it in the vermiculite, and then work on a couple other projects while this cools down slow. I'm just gonna take this to the horn, lay it just into there, blend those corners into the rest of the body. Make it look a little nicer. I'm gonna put my touch mark into this, and it's ready to go into the vermiculite for an annealing cycle. Looking good. All right, back in the fire. I'm gonna spin it around. Make sure the tip gets to nice dull orange. Let that soak for a little bit and then put it in the vermiculite to cool down very slowly and allow the stresses of forging to relieve over time. All right, the punch is cooled down, which means it's relaxed all of that extra stress from the forging process. Now it's time to get to grinding, and we're gonna get this thing looking nice before heat treat. All right, so we got it all ground up. I got the tip ground to the shape and the dimensions I want. I've got the hammer end ground to kind of a crown. Now it's time to heat treat. Let's go. So what I'm doing is I've quenched about the first 1/2 inch to 1 inch of this punch from a dull orange temperature, and I've let the remaining heat in the body of the punch bleed forward to temper that hardness back. If you leave a tool, or especially a blade, too hard, it becomes too brittle to use for its intended purpose. So to draw that hardness back from the tip of the punch, which is going to be in contact with steel as you're punching it and going to be receiving pretty heavy blows, you want to draw that hardness back and give it a little more ductility and a little more flexibility to withstand those hard hits. Now, to do that tempering process, the steel is oxidizing at different colors corresponding to different temperatures as it creeps toward the tip of the punch. And as it gets to a dull straw yellow color toward the tip, I am quenching to arrest the temper, because I don't want it to get too soft so that it starts to mushroom and bend as I'm using it, but I don't want it to be too hard so that it fractures or cracks as I'm using it either. And I just do this as many times as I can each time I make a punch, and it looks like I've gotten to the point where it's gonna sit right about 400, 450 degrees and not get any hotter. It might if I leave it for a long period of time. I'm starting to get kind of a purple and blue back here. I don't think that'll show up on camera, but if I leave it, it might creep all the way up. But I'm gonna do a final quench here and then give it a good brushing and a layer of beeswax to keep it nice looking and prevent rust from developing on the untreated steel. Just gonna give this one final, I don't think it's gonna get hot enough to ruin my temper, but I'm gonna give it a final scrape on a side that I can tell is the fresh side, to keep an eye on the colors just in case it is hotter than I think. I give it a good brushing. And that gives me a chance to clear any of the new extra forge scale off. I'm gonna give this, other than the tip, I'm gonna give it a nice layer of beeswax just to kind of seal it off and make it look nice. I don't want to do this over my anvil. I've learned the hard way. I don't want a layer of wax on my anvil face. It'll melt off eventually, but it can smoke me out sometimes too. All right, so I'm gonna lock this in the vise, let it cool down even further, let that wax solidify before I finish the final polish. It's looking pretty good.
Now that's going to do it for today's video. If you are inspired to make this style of round punch, please let me know in the comments section, and if you enjoyed this video, please drop a like, leave a comment, hit subscribe, ring that notification bell. If you want to support me in the channel further, please consider becoming an honorary striker on my Patreon. Link is in the description below the video, and as always, keep on rocking.